What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing another video. Today I'm bringing a video on Power Rangers Hyperforce episode 24. Yes, we are 24 episodes in, meaning that next week will be our final episode. This episode was the first of two parts for our finale, and the episode overall was really cool. We got to see 3 Rangers make a return. Well, actually, 2 of them were return guest appearances, and one of them was new one. One of them was the one that I was hoping we would get at some point during the season, and I'm so happy we got this guest appearance, and that was the Red In-Space Ranger, who was played by Christopher Caven Lee, and he played Andros, the Red In-Space Ranger. We also had the return guest appearances of Mike Jin, who played Jem, and Karen Ashley, who played Aisha. So that is very cool. Overall, this episode was a lot of fun. We got some great stuff from the Rangers. We got some great stuff from our guests. Christopher Caven Lee was awesome. I mean, personally, even though his personality sometimes can be a little bit tough, he actually did a great job. He was really into it. He knew his season well. He knew how to play his role super well. And some of this stuff really has shown that he's changed a lot more with his perspective on the show and his attitude towards the show. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure he loves what he does. It's just in passing over the years, I have seen it where he has shown some like mixed responses towards the show, even though he loves to promote it. And it could just be that he's messing around. It's just always hard to tell sometimes, because sometimes actors really do feel that way. Like sometimes they really don't like what they're doing, or they're just joking around. It's hard to say, you know. I don't want to give you guys, I don't want to make you guys think like Andros hates his season. Like, don't think that. Believe me, I've heard different things, I've seen different things, and I've interacted with him before. I've actually met him at Power Morphicon a couple years ago. So he's a cool guy. He's definitely someone that's worth meeting at least once in your life. Again, Power Rangers In Space is a super popular season. I've met 2 of the In Space Rangers before. I've met Justin Nemo, who played Zane, and I've met Andros, who was played by Christopher Caven Lee before. But just in general, this was a really cool episode. It was nice to see some returning cameos. It was also just a cool situation. We did get the official confirmation as to who the Alliance leader was, even though it was pretty much given away who it was without actually giving a name drop last episode. And that's why I kind of put it into the thumbnail last episode, because it was implied. Like, I honestly didn't expect them to change anything from what was pretty much set up last episode to what was actually confirmed for the Alliance leader. So if anyone was second guessing on Thrax being the Alliance leader, well, yeah. And I'm straight up saying this right now. Yes, I know I straight up right now just told you guys Thrax is the Alliance leader, but I might as well at this point. Keep it in mind. Thrax is the Alliance leader, and if you have not watched this episode, please understand, it's not. You're gonna find that out fairly quickly. It's a cool situation. We see that that Andros actually arrives at the dinner party that happens for the United Alliance of Evil, where they're just kind of having their meal and everything, and Andros is trying to scope out the scene, see what kind of enemies are there, and eventually he is captured by Joe, who actually comes using his teleportation kind of abilities to, you know, quickly teleport Andros out of there, bring him to the Hyperforce ship. And what happens is that the three Rangers that I said before are all there. They end up meeting each other. We also have Merlin from episode 11 shows up. So that was when they went to you know, Camelot and those kind of times. And then there was also Lena Song from the SPD era. So again, we had all these different characters that were being played. It was a really cool situation. They had different plans set up. They were going to try to deal with the Alliance leader without affecting the history, and also having to make sure to inform Andros of certain things without having to give anything away that would affect his history. So like not, you know, telling him things that should happen before they do, you know, letting things play out the way that they're supposed to happen without being the one to actually cause it. So again, of course, with Power Rangers Hyperforce, one of the biggest things that they tend to rely on often enough is the fact that they want to help history without actually doing anything to affect it. So in other words, make it so that the events that are supposed to occur and prevent those things that would lead to other things that shouldn't happen, making it so that they don't happen. So in other words, say a monster that never was in this part of the show, making sure that it ceases to exist or it avoids existing because this team is here and it's stopping them. That's the kind of stuff that they do often enough, and it's really cool because, again, they have to deal with these kind of enemies like Thrax being in the United Alliance dinner. That's not it's not how it's supposed to work. Thrax wasn't supposed to be there, but that's why these Rangers had to figure out their way around this. At the same time, they also ended up creating several bombs. Jem, being someone that's very big on creating bombs and explosives and all that, creates bombs around the perimeter of the dinner party, and they're going to use that as a backup plan. They're also thinking of using a hologram, which Marvel control, to kind of get their way in there and also make sure that they don't get hurt. Because, say, for example, they need to use it, it might be their only chance in surviving certain attacks. So that's very important to consider. So all that and more does happen. We do see that eventually the Rangers do arrive at the dinner party. Andros ends up wearing his cloak, which the other Rangers do use as well. Vesper this episode does still have the problem of dealing with Alpha 55 and the fact that she has to share her body with him. So that is an unfortunate factor, of course. But at the same time, it does make sense. As far as whether or not we will see Vesper have her body again by the end of the season, I don't know. I'm kind of imagining probably not. I would probably imagine that it will end without that happening, but you never know. Maybe they'll find some way to do it before the season ends. And if they do a second season, obviously that's a great opportunity for them to start fresh and maybe find a way to kind of give her a body again. But also, this is kind of like an episode. We're at that point where it's the end of the season, so they might be focusing more on the story rather than adding a body to a Ranger that really doesn't need it necessarily. If we have backup, why do we need to focus on something that maybe isn't as important at this moment? Would it be helpful? Yes, it would definitely be helpful if Vesper had her body and she could fight as a Ranger and they could use the Hyperforce Megazord. But at the same time, they do what they have to do and they make it work. So that's very important. The Hyperforce Rangers, we do end up seeing that Thrax is revealed to them as a semaphore, and when that happens, he actually confronts Rita Repulsa and Lord Zed, talking about their whole family lineage and the fact that he's their son and he wants to take over, the United Alliance and really rule and all that stuff. And the thing is that, Lord Zed and Rita are actually fairly supportive of everything that's going on. At the same time, we also have to deal with the threat of Dark Spectre coming in and, unveiling the fact that he has Zordon now in his control, which is very important because that has to do a lot with the season itself. And what happens in Power Rangers in Space at this dinner party when Dark Spectre speaks to them, which is super cool that Dark Spectre is in this. The fact that they introduce him and kind of incorporate him into this whole entire story is a nice touch. We also see throughout this that the Rangers do end up having to fight several Quantrons. They also end up having to deal with Goldar, which is a very cool moment where there's some really funny stuff that happens, specifically Karen Ashley, who played Aisha, doing some really funny stuff with like distracting, using dancing and all that, which was really cool. I love that whole sequence. We also have it where Andros does some really cool stuff in battle, and he's just a really cool character. I mean, I love his personality. I think that they did a lot of really, really smart stuff. They wrote this whole situation really, really well, and they really made it so that everyone, even if they weren't necessarily always involved, had some functionality, were able to get a laugh out of it, and just kind of enjoy themselves, you know. That's the one thing that's great about this kind of a show, especially when you have people that don't necessarily do this stuff on a regular basis, that everyone finds a way to enjoy themselves and isn't just sitting there kind of bored out of their minds, you know. I mean, Andros, you know, Christopher Kamen Lee, he has done something like this like one other time. And the thing is that it's not a common thing, yet he really knew his season really well. So he knew what things to talk about and add to his whole situation. And that was something that was really great. You know, I love when they do that kind of stuff because it shows that they're paying attention to what they're in. And of course, it doesn't mean that any of these other actors don't know their seasons. It's just that it shows on his part that, you know, he's really aware of all this important detail that came from his character. And I mean, he was like the heart and soul of, you know, Power Rangers in Space, which is like such a popular season that people would be, you know, upset if he didn't know his stuff. You know, it would be one of those situations where it's like, oh, we came here to watch this awesome actor come out and portray this role, but he doesn't know what he's doing, right? You know, it's a very important thing to always consider when you have a show like this, that, you know, your actors know what they're doing and they know what they're talking about. So all this and more does happen. The Rangers, we end up confronting Divatox. They confront Astronema at one point. All sorts of different situations occur. You even have Eddie and Jack and Chloe, you know, with bombs going off, and Chloe does use her battleizer. We also see it where, like, Eddie and Jack confront Zordon, and they have a whole conversation. Zordon wants to have himself destroyed, which at the same time, though that's correct to what happens, it's not correct as to when it's supposed to happen and who's supposed to destroy him. Because again, as we know, the one that's supposed to destroy him is Andros, and when it's supposed to be at the end of the season. So we're a bit early for that, but he is trying to protect the universe, which is very good and very important because it reflects well off of what does end up happening, and, you know, his role as a savior and as someone that ends up protecting the entire universe and leads to a whole chain of future events that are super important to the entire franchise, that had they not happened, you know, who knows where the Rangers would be, right? You know, it's amazing how well they kind of set that whole story up, and that's one of the things that I always praise In Space for, was that whole setup at the end and how it really just connects to the bigger story and all those other points that really, you know, channel through that whole situation. So what we also end up seeing is, you know, several different interactions between the Rangers. We do see it where there are team attacks, such as through Joe and Jem. Chloe also does do some interesting stuff this episode. We have some typical Jack shenanigans. Again, some of this stuff I'm also not mentioning just because, you know, the episode ended in a pretty intense way. If there are things that I didn't mention, please keep in mind also that today was kind of one of those situations where I had a super long day, like over a 10-11 hour day. So I normally would have a lot more energy and be able to really watch the show with more and be able to really focus in. But today was just one of those days where I literally, within the last half hour or so, I was passing out because I was just so tired, and, you know, having an 11-hour workday is hard for me. But moving back to the actual show itself, you know, please understand if there's stuff I missed, tell me in the comments below, because I will understand that. I know that this is not, I know that I'm not talking as thoroughly as I typically do with these, just because it's a harder situation when I have such a long work week this week for me than I do outside of this. So understand this now. If I'm missing stuff, it's just one of those weeks. Next week for the final episode, I should be back in better shape, and then we'll be good. Again, as I said before, Power Rangers Hyperforce has been a really great show. 24 episodes in, great guests, great people, great story. We have had a lot of fun moments. It was cool because they also mentioned with Vesper having this whole point about, like, you know, the love and the relationships with Eddie and all that. Like, that was something that was kind of mentioned about, like we won't talk about that whole thing today. And you know, these relationships are always interesting. There was even conversations during the fireside chat about like which Rangers do the guest actors like the most, which is cool. We ended up seeing several different interactions between different villains, and we saw Elgar being drained by the Alliance leader, which was cool. I mean, the fact that we have these villains that you would think, when would we ever get the chance to actually see these villains in the show actually get some functionality, was pretty cool, you know? I mean, I love when they find creative ways to incorporate these characters and make them a lot of fun. You know, Power Rangers Hyperforce has been a really interesting story. Will we get a second season? It's not confirmed. When would I expect a second season? Next year. I'm not expecting one this year. Could it happen? Sure. But personally, I feel like, you know, at this point, there's a lot of things that need to occur before we can get a second season. And just in general, they have to deal with a lot of channels and a lot of different things to make sure that, you know, everything can happen, and they want to make sure that they have the money to really do it, because they want the season to be bigger and better and, you know, worth doing. So keep that in mind. If you're a Power Rangers fan, I definitely suggest supporting. How do you support? You know, posting on social media, talking with people online, speaking to friends, spreading the word, just kind of getting it out there and making yourself known, especially watching on Twitch. Please do this. The reason why I say that is because watching on YouTube, though it's important, it's way more important to watch on Twitch when it shows, because that's the thing that really tells them, oh, if people are watching, then that means we have the chance to do more and more seasons, especially if they watch on Twitch. If they watch on YouTube, it only matters so much, and it doesn't really give a clear indicator as to how well the show is really doing, because, you know, you're talking about a live audience versus an audience that's watching it whenever they feel like it. You know, one day you could have 500 people watching it, another day you could have 2. So again, that's very important to consider, because that doesn't give a proper indicator. But when you have an audience of 8,000 people like it was today watching it at once, that's really good. Because what that does is it tells them right away, if we can get that many people watching a show like this all at once, we have something here. We have something we can go off of and build and explore and really show a really cool season out of that people want to watch. You know, like, that's the important key factor here. Power Rangers Hyperforce really has done some really amazing things with these last 5 or 6 episodes when it came to viewership, where they're really showing that, like, people want this show to last. People want to see where this show can go. And, you know, that's all because of us as viewers. The fact that we come out on Tuesdays and decide, hey, I could be doing a million other things right now, and I'm not joking. You know, we could be doing a million other things right now. We could be playing a game. We could be, you know, doing something entire. We could be having food or whatever. But instead, what are we doing? We're watching Power Rangers Hyperforce because we're fans. We love this show, and we want to see where these characters grow and develop. And that's really what's important here. You know, the fact that we care enough really says everything to them, because it tells them that this is a show that needs to go on. You know, if you're a Power Rangers fan, this is the kind of show that a lot of us have been dreaming about for years, that want to see, you know, the more exciting, the more graphic, the more amazing, the more intense stories, the stories that, you know, you never would think that you would get to see, where characters from, you know, multiple seasons can come together, or there's references from most seasons kind of tapped in there, even if it's for a second, even if it's just a little nod or a mention of something. The fact that we get that kind of attention is so important. I mean, the fact that, like, almost every not every season, but a lot of seasons have been represented, even through a joke throughout the season, really is an important factor to consider, because it's not an everyday thing. I mean, Power Rangers Hyperforce is a really special show. I know I'm giving it a lot of praise today, and I always try to give you guys something to understand from my perspective. I mean, I am a fan of the show. my biggest problem with the show a lot of times is just the time. You know, again, I wish that the show work differently where it wasn't as long as it was. Again, this has to do with how the whole RPG system works, so I understand it from that perspective, but at the same time, I am a busy person. I do have a lot of things going on in my life. I don't talk about these things with you guys as much, but I do have other things going on, and you know, as much as I enjoy watching this every week, I also have other things that I could and I would love to be doing right now, and it doesn't mean that I'm against doing Power Rangers Hyperforce reviews. It's just at the same time, as these weeks go by, I also find that I'm finding other things that I have to be doing. So keep it in mind. Again, this episode was a lot of fun. There were things that I definitely missed out a little bit on. Apparently, you know, again, Andros was left with himself bleeding and in pain, and again, as far as whether or not the guest stars will be returning next episode, nope, that's not happening. That's something that was basically discussed. They are not going to have them return next episode, so the story from here will be set in motion based on the Hyperforce Rangers continuing their journey. Now, as far as Lena Song and Merlin go, they may actually continue, but as far as the guests, as I said before, they are done pretty much, and next episode maybe we'll have a guest, but I don't think so. It's hard to really say for a fact. If they get a guest, great. If they don't, then we'll still have a really good time, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the final episode holds for us, because it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be really cool, and I'm waiting to see what kind of payoff we get in the end, so that we feel like we got a really good season out of this, and we can say, you know, look how far we've gone. You know, think about where we started, and think about where we are, and think about how we could go even further if we had the second season. Because again, I am completely in support of it, even though I've mentioned before that I personally also have other things that I would love to be doing. But if I know at least that we are getting one, I will at least be happier for us as a franchise versus a fan base, for people that just in general like the show. I mean, I enjoy the show a lot. I think the actors are great. I think the story's great, and I just want to see where things will go from here. So please understand, again, a lot of praise today. Definitely an episode that is worth watching. If you are a Power Rangers in Space fan, if you're a Power Rangers fan in general, this is definitely an episode that you should watch. But of course, I would definitely recommend watching a lot of the stuff that has come out before it, so that you're not lost on what's going on here and you know the whole context of the situation. As far as things go overall, I'd love to know your opinions about this episode and more. What was your favorite part? What things you're looking forward to in the final episode? And just in general, what things did you like the most? So please remember to like, comment, subscribe. I will see you guys in the next video. And until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 71, and goodbye, guys.